So I thought I'd do a rundown of this device, which is the IPFire Eco, which I got sent by the IPFire project to test out, have a play with, let them know what I think and create videos on it and stuff like that, which is really cool. It's a really sweet device. I've got so much sort of praise to give it, and a bit of a first impressions to do, and you know, run down the specs and stuff like that. First things first, those of you that don't know the IPFire project, if you've never heard of it before, it's a routing and firewall distribution, so it's kind of like a little bit like Untangle, a little bit like pfSense, that kind of stuff. And it does loads of really funky stuff. It's a really good distribution. You can pretty much chuck it on any machine. It runs on ARM, it runs on Raspberry Pis, it runs on embedded devices, it runs on beastie servers, it runs on loads of stuff, and it's really cool. So first things first, let's go into the specs of the IPFire Eco and then go from there. So specs wise aren't too impressive. It's only the device only supports 1 to 25 users, so it's not supposed to be, you know, insanely powerful. But it's a mini ITX unit. It runs at 13 watts, which is stupidly low. It's completely fanless, completely silent, which is really cool. That's fantastic. An Intel Atom dual-core CPU. Not too sure what the actual specs of it are because I've not really looked into it too much. It's got 4 GB of RAM. It's got a 60 gig SSD drive, which is really cool. It's got 4 Intel Gigabit Ethernet ports, which is fantastic. Network interface cards, which is cool. It's got an optional 150 megabit WLAN connection, which is quite sweet. On the back, we're getting, apart from the four RJ45 slots for some Ethernet, we've got some USB loving, some VGA for some screenage, and an RS232 connection, yeah, for getting your serial on. So let's actually kind of do like a breakdown of it and kind of go from there. As you can see on your screen at the moment, the IPFire Eco is red and it looks fucking sexual as hell. It looks really cool, and what I'd really like to see is IPFire and Lightning Labs create that case on its own, sell it for about 50 quid, and you know, just have it so people can put their own mini ITX bits in it, because it just looks so cool. It's like red and it's just wow. It really does make an impact. It just looks really sexy. And I know in terms of a corporate environment, it's probably not going to matter too much because it's probably going to be hidden away, but it just looks really sweet. I'd like to actually build a PC that looks like that, maybe a home theatre PC or something like that, that actually has that red case. It would look so sweet. But yeah, so in terms of kind of... So basically it is completely fanless and it is completely silent, which is really good because you can just kind of run it and it doesn't make any noise and it's fantastic. The trouble is that the downside of that is that it does get a little bit warm. I'm a little bit concerned that it's going to reduce the lifespan of the CPU because it does get quite hot. I know it is a fanless system, and obviously, you know, you do get a little bit of a, you know, you do get more heat produced, but or, you know, reduced cooling, but it does seem to run quite hot. Not, you know, not so it's so hot you can't touch it. It just runs a little bit warmer than I'd expect it to. But its components are really sweet. They're, I mean, say the spec's not great, but it's not supposed to be great. The components are built like a British shithouse. You can pretty much just run it, and it'll probably last you 10-15 years, probably just non-stop going, and it probably would never break. And the warranties are ridiculous anyway. You get 24 months warranty, I think, as standard, and 36 as an optional add-on, which is really good, and you get loads of support with IPFire as well as Lightning Labs, which is really quite sweet. So let's go on to costing, because that's kind of what a lot of people are going to be wondering is how much it costs. 650 euros. So by the time you add on VAT and shipping and all that other stuff, it probably works out about 800 quid, which is very expensive for a router that only supports 25 users. Is it worth that? Hells yes, it is. It seriously is worth. It's probably worth about £1,000. In all honesty, in terms of its build quality, in terms of its components, in terms of its awesomeness, it probably is worth about £1,000. Would I go out and spend £1,000 on a router, 800 quid on a router like that? Certainly not. Will any of my clients spend that kind of money on a router? Maybe they might, but certainly not for those that are looking at 1 to 25 users. They certainly wouldn't. Maybe those that have got, you know, 100 plus users, they definitely would, you know, look at spending a little bit more, but certainly not that kind of low number, which I think is a bit of a shame, really, because it's a really sweet device. It's definitely worth that kind of money. What I'd really like to see is IPFire and Lightning Labs creating another unit that is cheaper than that, maybe 300 quid, 200 quid, ideally 100 quid. If they can get that to 100 quid, that would be amazing, but they won't be able to get that because they need to be able to ship a lot of units, and there's no way they'd be able to do that. But you know, I'd like to see them maybe make a cheaper case. You know, not too fussed on color or anything like that. You know, make a cheaper case, use cheaper components, use a really crappy board. Maybe go ARM. You know, maybe have like an ARM chip or something like that. And you know, reduce RAM to about 1 GB, and have, you know, maybe like 16 gigs worth of flash memory just to play around with for the onboard sort of, you know, getting IPFire to work, and then maybe some extra USB ports for things like if you want to do caching and stuff like that. That's what I'd really like to see, and I'd also like to see them say maybe putting a fan in there as well, and seriously, you know, making a really cheap version. It certainly doesn't really need four NICs on the back. Gigabit, yeah, fair enough, but it certainly doesn't need 4 of them. I mean, I use 3 of them, but that's only because I'm a geek and that's kind of what I do. But in a business environment, you probably won't need more than 2 anyway. And especially if you're going to spend, you know, maybe 300 quid on one, that's a little bit better. And it is a bit of a shame, because you know, it's a really sweet device. It's worth that money. It seriously is. And I'm not being paid to say that. I'm honestly not. You know, this is just me just talking. You know, my honest opinion. It's worth that money. It seriously is. I don't think, you know, they can't charge any less than that. But what they need to do is they need to create a device that is less money, because there's no way in hell anybody would spend that kind of money on a router. I would spend £1,000. I would spend 100 quid on it. You know, if IPFire created you know, an ARM based something, maybe based a little bit around the Raspberry Pi, but obviously their own version of it, then yeah, I would love to see that. I would think that would just be amazing. I mean, IPFire does run on ARM and it runs on Raspberry Pis, but the trouble is with Raspberry Pi, the ARM chip that's on there is kind of crap. It's not really got very much power behind it. It's got shit all RAM, and it's just not really designed for routing and TCP/IP and NASing and all these other bits and pieces you want your router to be able to do. So I'd really love for them to, you know, look at a ARM-based solution and maybe, you know, team up with a manufacturer, maybe in China or something like that, and create something that is cheap and, you know, amazing and just great. That's what I'd really like to see. I have to, you know, don't get me wrong, the device is amazing and it's certainly worth a lot more than they actually sell it for, but realistically, no one's really going to buy it. Or at least nobody's going to buy it that doesn't need to be on 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. Because, so, I mean, the components are built like brick showers. You can just run it and run it and run it, and it just will not fall over. But, you know, with that kind of comes a cost. And small to medium business owners are certainly not going to spend, well, about £1,000 on a router unless they need to be on 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I mean, because most of the time, the places I've deployed stuff, and it's mostly been public access Wi-Fi. There's been a few small to medium businesses that I've deployed routers to, and more often than not, I've used an old PC and just deployed a routing software on there. Traditionally, it's been Untangle, and now it will be in the future IPFire, because I've got a lot of knowledge about IPFire, which is really cool. But it's, you know, it's a lot of money to be spending on a router, and the problem obviously is that you're going to have as a, you know, as an IT professional, if you're going to look at deploy this, is when you're trying to sell it to your clients will know that they can pick up a 20 quid router on Amazon and they'll think it will do the same thing. We all know that it won't. You know, it's not even on the same wavelength as that, but that's kind of what all your customers are going to be thinking. They're all going to be thinking, well, routers only cost like 20 quid, and you're saying to them, well, yeah, but they're not really designed for doing the kind of stuff you want it to do. So yeah, I think that's kind of really it, my kind of first impressions of it. It is really, really cool. It's just, I've just been running it pretty much non-stop for a month, and it has been fantastic. It's never cut out. It's been, you know, it has literally been solid, and it looks really cool, and it's just, it is a really, really sweet device. Would I recommend going out and buying it? Yes. If you've got, you know, if you seriously need to be on 365 days a year, then yes, go and get it. You know, spend the money because it's seriously worth it. If you're, you know, if you haven't got that kind of money, then no, I certainly wouldn't say it's worth spending. I mean, it is worth spending that kind of money, but you could get a lot cheaper devices that would do kind of the same thing. Yeah, okay, maybe the warranty's not so good, but you know, it is a really sweet device. Don't get me wrong, it's really cool. It's just a lot of money. It seriously is a lot of money's worth. to be spending on a router. But yeah, I think that's pretty much my roundup of the IPFire Eco. I'll put a link in the description below of where you can actually look to buy one, and also the IPFire project as well, which is really cool. And yeah, so apart from that, I shall catch you in a later video.